What's up everybody? My name is Brian Manier and I'm here to talk about the brand new Fujifilm X-T4. Check it out. So typically when Fujifilm releases a new camera, they'll send it to me. I'll have, some time to kind of play with it, work up a blog post, shoot some images. But I've kind of felt like we're fresh off the heels of the X100V launch where, I did a blog post with a bunch of images and I just wasn't really in the mood to write again. So, the fact that the X-T4 is so video focused, I figured, why not try something new? Do a little bit of a video, talk about my experience with the camera. I know it's only been a short time, but I really do feel like I got a good handle on, the feel of the camera and the functionality of the camera. What was interesting about this particular launch is, I'm a stills, a landscape shooter, and obviously it being a very video focused camera, they wanted me to shoot some video content with it. Video is something that, I have a past in. Like, I used to shoot video. I never really grew into it because I figured the path into video is very, collaborative, production oriented, where you're surrounding yourself with a bunch of people, and I think it's cool, but I'm very much like a lone wolf. Like, I just want to go wherever I want to go and shoot. When it came to this camera and, getting back into shooting video again based on some of the specs, the 240 frames per second was something that jumped out at me. I've never really played with slow-mo. Like, we all have slow-mo on our iPhones and stuff, but the quality pretty much sucks. This really gave me some encouragement to go out and try something new. So I actually shot a couple different videos. One is more like landscape focused. It's winter here in Michigan, so we had a couple days where it was really snowy, and snow in 240 frames per second looks insane. Awesome. So, I got to just really get out of my comfort zone and try something new. Another video that I did that I'll be releasing is kind of a story. Like, I wrote an entire storyboard based around an idea that I had with the 240 frames per second slow-mo. And then I kind of built this story around this idea for a shot that I had, and it's of my son. And I've never done anything like this before, right? Like, it's always been something that I've wanted to do. I just didn't have the urge, the deadline to push me to doing this. So this whole camera launch has been really cool because I've gotten to really just step outside my normal realm of, shooting some lifestyle photos of the camera, shooting some landscape photos with the camera, and then just kind of talking to people about, the new features. I don't really want to get into the specs and the breakdown and stuff. I'm going to touch on a few things that really pertain to the way that I shoot and the things that stuck out to me while I was shooting. Obviously, so size is a huge deal with this camera because for me, I prefer the smaller XT body to the larger XH1 body. And it's not, the XH1 always felt great to me in my hand, but I carry two bodies with me everywhere just to limit the amount of time I'm changing lenses, and two XH bodies takes up a pretty decent chunk of room in my bag where two XT bodies don't. So going into this, knowing that they were probably going to give this camera IBIS, which is probably the biggest feature, I was just really hoping that it wasn't going to compromise anything in size. And taking it out of the box for the first time, I was blown away. It just felt like an XT body. They've beefed it up. It is a little bit thicker, but you can't even really tell, which is nice. You can, and it's hard to explain. You just got to get it in your hand because honestly, it feels like an XT3. Just, it's got a little bit more of a grip, which is a good thing, I think. And it's really not much heavier at all. So obviously, it's a bigger body because they put a bigger battery in here, which is nice. I've never had an issue with, battery life on these cameras, but especially with the IBIS, I know the XH1 really chewed through batteries, so this is going to make a huge difference. I think where the X-T3 got around 390 shots in its normal mode, this thing, you can get around 500 to 600 shots in economy mode. So it's definitely a worthy upgrade, and I know it's kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. There's a lot of people that are upset now that all the batteries they have aren't going to work in the new camera, which I totally understand. I'm in that same boat, but at the same time, it's been the same battery since the X Pro 1 launched, so I think it's probably time. Other things that I've noticed with it, like really big autofocus improvements, especially on the faster lenses. I'm not really like an autofocus nut, being that most everything that I shoot is static, but I do have a 3-year-old son that I chase around frequently, so, you know, between the just general autofocus improvements and then the face and eye detection improvements, it's a much faster camera all around when it comes to autofocus. The sensor stabilization is really amazing, and it's one of those things where as a still shooter, it's not ever been something that I've like died to have in my cameras. I definitely have noticed a big difference in hand holdability when I'm shooting like pre-sunrise, post-sunset, and I shoot a lot with the 50-140, which already has amazing optical stabilization in the lens, but working with the X-T4 together with the sensor stabilization, it's like a whole other level. So it's definitely just another tool that I can see being useful in my toolbox. I like to think of all of my gear as this, you know, they're all tools. I have this giant toolbox, and what I'm reaching for is helping me to achieve a certain goal. This camera is targeted at more of a hybrid type shooter who's shooting video and stills. I think the ease of use to switch back and forth with the new dedicated stills and video button, the stills and video switch really helps. There were a lot of times while in this short time frame that I've been shooting, I'd be shooting photos and then I'd switch over to video mode really quick and then, you know, obviously adjust my shutter speed. I usually shoot stills in aperture priority a lot of the time just because I love using the exposure compensation dial. It's right there at your thumb. So for me, you know, switching from stills and aperture priority to movie mode with a flip of the switch, and then depending on the frame rate that I'm shooting, you know, most of the time I was at 240, so I'd change it over to a 500th of a second just so I'd have my 180-degree shutter rule. But yeah, it's just really easy to flip back and forth and retain settings on either side, whether you're in video or stills mode. It's just a pleasant experience to shoot with when you're bouncing back and forth like that. They've really separated out the menus. So when you're in video mode, your menus are all video dedicated. And when you're in photo mode, they're all photo dedicated. Whereas before it was like a kind of a little mix and certain things would get grayed out. So I think it kind of helps the camera to get out of the way, which is one of the reasons I love these cameras so much to begin with. Is it, you know, I can look here and tell you that I'm at a 500th of a second shutter speed, ISO 160 and f4, right, on my lens without even having the camera on. So like for me, not having to think about like where is this feature and being able to like program it to a function button is really nice. Just to know, to learn the camera so that you can achieve the result you want to achieve when you're out in the field. So one of the things with the stills video switch, speaking of function buttons, I was a little bummed when I saw it because I use the photometry, the metering modes on X-T3 and X-T2 all the time to switch between spot metering, you know, multi-evaluative metering. You know, as a landscape shooter, I'm constantly bouncing between those, so I understand why it had to go and make room for this because this camera's targeted at such a different shooter, and it's easy enough. I've already programmed, you know, the metering modes to a different function button, so it's totally fine. Moving on, you know, obviously we're going to have to talk about the screen, and this seems to be a very divisive, I mean, we live in a pretty divisive time, right? But like the screens that Fujifilm has come out with on their last 2 flagships have kind of parted the seas a little bit. I gotta be honest, like the design of the screen on the X-T3 has been absolutely perfect for me in every way. I love just being able to flip it up and it's centered to the back of the camera, whereas this, when you want to flip, and now is kind of tilted off to the side, it's just a feel thing. Like you got to get used to it. There are negatives and positives to each screen. I think, you know, obviously this being able to see yourself set up a shot, you know, this is just a far more flexible screen in your ability to shoot, being that it, you know, the angles vary. And then also I think I shoot vertical so much that where the XT screen only flipped out at like, you know, whatever, 25 degrees or whatever, this being able to get right on the ground parallel and like having the flexibility is really nice as a shooter, so that's definitely one positive. And then the last thing that I'll say about the screen is being able to protect it. I've never had an issue with a broken screen, but I treat my gear pretty I mean, I just use it, you know. I don't think, oh, I need to baby this camera so it doesn't ever get a scratch on it. Thinking in terms of like their marketing with the X Pro 3 as like, you know, they want you in the viewfinder, right? None of this stuff where you're shooting. I think just being able to hide the screen away, and just focus on the EVF, which is beautiful, and see what I mean. Going back to the reason that I loved shooting mirrorless to begin with was seeing the end result, right? I don't have image review turned on my cameras because you're reviewing the image before you even click the shutter. That's the way to shoot with a mirrorless camera. Be present and in the moment and just experience what you're shooting. So I will say probably the biggest thing that I am a fan of with this camera body is the new focal plane shutter. The shutter in the old bodies is rated around 150,000 clicks before it has the potential to give out. I've personally never blown a shutter in any of my X series cameras, and I've had a lot of X series cameras, but the new focal plane shutter in this is a lot quieter, and it's also double the life. So this is rated at 300,000 clicks. So it's definitely more of a pro-oriented body. So I think one of the things that stuck out to me as it pertains to video and trying to kind of figure out what I wanted to do when I started shooting video on the X-T4, it all came back to storytelling, right? I've never been a good storyteller through my imagery, right? Because like I take pretty landscape photos. The experience, the story is kind of internal. It's like an internal dialogue that's going on. And sometimes I share that, but like you don't read that through a photo like you would like a really good portrait photographer or something. As a still photographer who doesn't really tell stories, it's been really eye-opening to kind of go down that path and try something new. But thanks for watching this. I really appreciate you checking out the video. I hope you get your hands on the camera to play with it because it is fun as F. If you have any questions, feel free to drop a line in the comments. Find me on Twitter, on Instagram. I'm super active over on Twitter. I love the photo community over there. So yeah, thanks a lot. Peace.